Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Kakwadash. Double honors the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth and citations to the sincere Akim and Aquath that may listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Okwai, back in here with another quick and Lord's will always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I'm going to be reading through a bit of this article on, it's called EuropeanConservative.com, the website. And what I'll also do is attach a link of the article in the description. Others can check it out, read it for yourselves, right? And the title of the article is Former Nestle CEO to Lead the World, Economic Forum. So, that should raise up your antennas, right? So what is the Nestle CEO doing with the World Economic Forum? So this article actually came out about a month ago, but I thought it was a very interesting event that took place with this man essentially coming and joining the WEF, right? So not only do you actually have countries, their leaders that are partaking in this, secret council of the wicked, right? But you also have, heads of certain corporations doing the exact same thing, right? And they devise, essentially, like the scriptures talk about how they devise iniquity, upon their beds, right? As a matter of fact, let me start there, because what these guys want to do is to push forth a bunch of unrighteous decrees, right? That whole C19, you know what I'm talking about, and their little syringe that they pushed upon the people, right? These people, there are essentially, they devise these different methods of unrighteousness and devise these methods of to push upon the people, and they tell you straight to your face. What do they say? They say you will own nothing and you'll be happy, right? That's a bold statement, right? So okay, this is Micah 2 verse 1. And it says, woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand, and they covet fields and take them by violence, right? So, and when you go through a lot of the different events that have taken place in regards to this company, Nestle, they've been essentially under a lot of fire for their wayward practices, their backward practices, essentially by exploiting, developing countries. And that's one of the things that Esau does. These different resources, he exploits these different other nations and takes it for home and takes it for his own, because he's a niggard. He's really and truly the original niggard, and I want to get that later on, right? But I kind of wanted to make that point. Let me just finish up verse 2, and now I'll get into the article. And it says, and they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage, right? And that's part of their objective, is to oppress you people, especially you Israelites. So it's very, very important for you Israelites to study who your enemy is, because your enemy studies you, right? The scriptures say that turn thou, O Jacob, and thou mayest be illuminated, right? Be illuminated with understanding into not just knowing who you are, but also understanding who your enemies are. Psalms 83, right? Psalms 83rd chapter, it gives you the whole rundown of who all of your enemies are, right? So you know how to conduct yourself and move, right? Especially in these times. So anyways, I know I rambled on quite a bit there, but just bear with me. Okay, so back to the article. So here it says Klaus Schwab, the central figure of the WEF, has announced his departure from the role of chairman of the board, a position he has held by establishing the organization in 1971. The announcement made public on April 21st comes at a delicate moment for the institution following the launch of the internal investigation into Schwab's management of resources and governance structures involving his family circle. So it says the interim leadership will assume by Peter Brabeck Lameth, former chairman of the and CEO of Nestle, who has been a member of the WF board for years, right? So he's within that circle, right? So it says Brabeck is well known for his controversial views on water management. On several occasions, he has stated that water should be considered an economic resource subject to regulation and commercialization, as it is a precious resource, right? So in right then and there, um, he's right in the sense that it is a precious resource. It's one of the main principles when you go through the scriptures. It's one of the main principal things of a man's life, right? So let me get that, and then get into how Esau is essentially a complete niggard. Um, okay, this is the book of Sirach, chapter. Where was I? 39, verse 26. And it says, the principal things of a whole use of man's life are water, fire, iron, salt, flour of wheat, honey, milk, and the blood of the grape oil, and clothing. All these things are good to the godly. So to the sinners, they are turned into evil, right? So these people, what they do is they take the principal things, all these different things, right? The first thing it mentions was the water, because now his mindset is to take it, commercialize it, bottle it, and exploit the people, especially a lot of you where your Israelites are situated in your different respective tribes, is to take these different resources, these natural resources, right, and then twist it to take it and to essentially refine it, change it, strip it of its nutritional value. We're going to harvest it to actually make more and more yield, and we're not going to care about the welfare of the soil, right? We're not going to care about the laws of the Heavenly Father, because to actually care about all these different things, you have to care about the Heavenly Father's laws, right? As the scriptures say, that what shall do to declare thy statutes and take thy covenant into thy mouth, to roughly paraphrase, because Esau is not the type of person that gives an shit about the Heavenly Father's ways, right? He's not somebody who's upright. The soul that's within him is absolutely not upright. So what does he do now? In this instance, his mindset is to take water, essentially covet it for himself and commercialize it. Another good example was the company. There's an Ish family that how do you call these people? I think they're called the Resniks, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, during that incident a couple months ago, in regards to the California fires, you had a private family, an Ish family, that were hoarding a lot of those resources for themselves. They didn't want essentially the when California was actually suffering from all those different fires. Ultimately, we know that's a judgment from the Lord, right? But you can see the mindset of Esau is not to actually care about the welfare of even his own people. He doesn't care about the welfare of the planet. He doesn't care about the welfare of these different things. So he would change it. You know, the water is not, it doesn't have its nutritional value. Another good one is the salt. The salt is heavenly. How do you call it? The table salt. This table salt is stripped of its important trace minerals. The honey is another good example, because for brothers who, if you use honey, you have to be so mindful of where you buy the honey, because after a certain amount of shelf, weeks after you buy it, one of the things I've noticed is that it starts to kind of harden. Its viscosity changes, right? So I don't even know what exactly they do with it, but it doesn't it's never the same way as you buy it, right? So all these things that Esau, he tampers with, and he makes it worse, right? And it doesn't have the value as it should be, and it can't serve a proper value for your own bodies, right? So I said a lot there. Let me go to the 14th chapter, because this is Esau's mindset. This is the type of person that he is. This is Sirach, again, chapter 14, verse 3. And it says, riches are not comely for a niggard, and what should an envious man do with money, right? So this is the type of riches, like he hoards riches for himself, right? And then he takes it and he makes it perverse. So he strips it, he contaminates it. That's another thing. Also, he also mentioned the oil, because what you get now these days that is heavenly marketed towards the people. You get all these different what's it called? Those the vegetable oil. You get the all these different cheap oils, and they're in these bright plastic bottles. And all these people, when you using a lot of these oils, is causing a lot of health problems towards the people, right? So everything that Esau does, he corrupts it, right? He's a profane person. So going back to the article here. So in a sense, yes, he's right. It is a precious resource, but it's precious if it's used and actually used properly, cared for properly, right? And that's with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that is actually, it can be used properly, right? But Esau doesn't have that mindset. He thinks he knows more than the Most High, right? Okay, so going back here to the article, it says Breivak's appointment reinforces one of the long-standing criticisms of the forum: its alignment with corporate interests above the needs of ordinary citizens. Nestle has been repeatedly accused of exploiting water resources in developing countries alongside a policy of water privatization. Again, going back to that precept I brought up earlier, you see he's an example of how riches are not comely, for a niggard. Esau really and truly is the original niggard. He is not somebody who actually has a mindset of actually, sharing with the people, actually using it properly. He's not a godly person. When somebody doesn't have nothing, they want to hoard everything to themselves, right? This is continuing on. Where was I? Just bear with me. Okay, I'll read this again, and it says Nestle has been repeatedly accused of exploiting water resources in developing countries, alongside a policy of water privatization that has generated public outrage in various social and environmental sectors. Since its inception in 1971, the WEF has evolved from a meeting of economic business experts into the premier showcase of globalist elite. Every year in the Swiss town of Davos hosts heads of state, bankers, top executives, multinational corporations, influential academics, officials from supranational organizations such as the UN, IMF, the European Commission. During these days, the general lines of global governance are laid out, often without filters or democratic debate, and later applied at national and continental levels. Okay, moving on here, it says the WEF has openly promoted initiatives such as the Great Reset, a proposal for economic and social restructuring in wake of the C1 to the 9 demic. I'll leave it like that. And it says many have seen this as an attempt to reconfigure the liberal economic model into one planned and directed by technocrats and major corporations. So not only do you have political heads of state who have their own representatives for this body, but now you actually have corporations also that are actually pushing forth policies and procedures that are adhering to this WEF people, right? So, like the scriptures say that, lest Satan should get an advantage of us, we are not ignorant of his devices. So he has people, placed in strategic places, that can actually push forth that agenda, right? So, continuing on here, it says, over the years, various voices have warned that many policies later adopted by national governments or institutions like the European Union do not originate in parliaments, but in the forums such as Davos, where common agendas are discussed behind closed doors on issues such as climate control, digital finance, artificial intelligence, and mitigation governance, right? So I want to look into that a quick second. But you can see here that, through these different policies, they kind of want to essentially kind of corral the people so they can kind of get them to, subscribe to that, that one world, agenda, right? And what their agenda is to be able to control the people, through that grain of rice, through tracking and tracing and monitoring, right? Right. So you see how even these companies have their own representatives that's tied to a higher power, and even the politicians also, right? Like the president of France, the PM in Canada, they all have the different representatives in respective countries. I know there are some of them in the Caribbean also, like for example the Prime Minister of Barbados. She's very connected to the WEF, right? So it also shows that your vote doesn't actually make a difference whether you vote for. I mean, it's righteous to have your own people, what's it called, like to have your own people, as a head of state. But it shows you that a lot of, as the scriptures say, the leaders cause the people to err. It doesn't make a difference who really you vote for, because you see the policies that are being pushed forth are coming from a figure, and a body that is above the people. They're all in on the same agenda, right? It's just, politics these days is just a theatrical show, right? It's commentary, it's something to talk about, it's just theater, and they're just actors, right? You had the as scriptures talk about, you had the two horns like a lamb and spake as a dragon. They have these two different sides. You have the liberals and you have the Democrats, but they still gonna push forth that they come in as a lamb very sweetly, and their objective is to come as a dragon, right? A dragon is fierce, right? Through these different laws, through these different policies, right? Just another quick point, and Rome had the exact same what's it called, framework. That's what made Rome so different from all the other different beasts that preceded them, pursuant to Daniel the 7th chapter, right? When you see those different entities, and you compare it to Rome, what made Rome different was because they had that element, where you actually would appoint somebody. So back then you had the patricians, and then you had the plebeians. The patricians were basically like the upper echelon of the people, and then your plebeians were like your regular like cobblers, fishermen, what's it called, stonemasons, those types of people. But it's the same framework you see in America, right? Where was I? Oh yes, I wanted to look up that mitigation governance because I didn't know what that was. So just let me look at that real quick. Let me just look it up. Okay, so this is, I'm sorry, migration governance. I was mispronouncing that. That says, okay, so migration governance is as follows. It refers to the policies, frameworks, and actions that regulate the movement of people across national borders. It encompasses the wide range of issues from immigration and emigration to refugee protection and the integration of migrants. And it says, effective migration governance aims to manage migration flows in a way that benefits migrants and host societies while upholding human rights and international obligations. So here are the key aspects. It says there's policy, there is legislation. One of the key things is data and information requires a connection. Data and information, so it requires the collection and analysis and use of data on migration trends, including demographics, labor markets, and impact of migration on host societies. It says border security and control, addressing challenges. That's pretty much it. Brothers. If the spirit impresses you, you can go into this. I didn't know what it was, but I thought I would just bring this out also for edification, right? So let me just finish this up here. It says Schwab's departure marks the end of an era, but not dismantling the structure he created, the private space with public influence, the WEF, where business, politics, and ideology intersect with will continue to operate, will now under B. Brabeck's leadership, even as criticisms over his legitimacy and lack of democratic oversight grow louder, right? So you see that these people are making certain moves and actually have a certain influence over the people. So you're starting to see a withering away of democratic policies. People, you realize your vote doesn't make a difference anymore. What basically what they say actually goes now, and they trickle that into their so-called representatives, in their respective countries, and they push forth that agenda, right? Let me get this here. This is Isaiah chapter 10, verse 1. And it says, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees and write grievousness on which they have prescribed, right? So you start to see the unrighteous decrees that this entity is pushing forth, because they don't actually push forth an agenda where it's essentially now they want to control the people. They want to make sure, they want to know where you're going. They want to know, what time you sleep, what you spend money on, how much lamb you bought today, how far did you walk away from your house. They want to know everything about you, people, right? So, in a time like this, it would behoove you Israelites to actually, come back to the Lord and seek refuge, because you start to see that your enemy, he's coming down with that great wrath. Because he has a short time. You start to see that, right now, he speaks very peaceably like a lamb, like, because it all sounds good. It sounds fluffy. He talks about the climate change, but he doesn't give a shit about the climate. Look at the state of the earth as it is now. The scriptures say that the earth mourneth and fadeth away, right? The haughty people of the earth, they languish. So roughly paraphrase, the earth is not in a healthy state, because we have a base ruler who's ruling over the earth, right? The scriptures say that the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. These are the types of people who are ruling over the earth and mismanaging its resources, because they think that they know more than the Most High. They think they can instruct on give counsel to the Most High, right? That's the type of pride that they have, right? Let me get what's that? Sirach. Hold on. It says that Sirach 42 verse 21, and it says, he hath garnished the excellent works of his wisdom, and he is from everlasting to everlasting. I'm sorry. Unto him may nothing be added, neither can he be diminished, and he hath no need for any counselor, right? So the Heavenly Father doesn't need, you peons, to you elites, to instruct him on how to actually make sure that, how the earth is actually needed, and what's required to actually make this earth flourish, right? The Lord gave us laws, statutes, and commandments to the Israelites, right? They are the rightful stewards to actually govern the earth, right? That's what this earth actually needs: a righteous kingdom with a righteous state of mind, with righteous people governing that earth, right? But what we see now is the complete opposite. We see the people mourning. You see the trees are dying, being cut down. Essentially, you see a mismanagement of the earth's resources, because they're kept and they're being ran in the wrong hands, right? So let me get this is Revelation chapter 13 verse 16, and it says, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, right? So this is the grain of rice that these people want to push forth, right? The charagma, right? Something to be put inside of you, right? Just to get something as simple as groceries is going to require that, right? To be able to eat, right? So you see the type of mindset. They want to be able to track and trace people, control the people. That's their mind frame. So, there's going to be a time where we really need divine intervention. We need Yahweh Bashim Shai to essentially, to rescue us from this man, right? Because, he's a bit, as the scriptures say. Actually, Yahweh Shai said it. Hold on. Where is it? There shall no flesh be saved. Where is it? In Matthew 22? No, that's Matthew 24 and 22. Okay, this is Matthew 24 and 22, and it says, and except those days be shortened, Yahushua speaking, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened, right? So, we're living in a time where, the days are, the days are going by quickly, right? So, it's crazy, right? You see a lot of the Lord's judgment, going forth upon the planet. You start to see a stirring up of, the of turmoil going on in the so-called Holy Land, right, with these unholy heathens, right? So, all I can say is, this is the best time to actually cling on to the Lord, right? And like the scriptures say that the prayers of the humble pierces the clouds, because we need a rescuer from this devil, man, from these people, right? So I guess I'll leave it there, but I sincerely pray and hope. As a matter of fact, I'll read that last precept since I brought it up. You know, because we're in a position where everything, and the scriptures also say, our bread shall be defiled amongst, the Gentiles, right? These other nations. This is what they do with the resources that you get access to, right? This is what they do to it. Where was I going to go? Oh, Sirach 35. 1 second. This is Sirach 35, verse 16, and it says, He that serveth the Lord shall be accepted with favor, and his prayer shall reach unto the clouds. The prayer of the humble pierceth the clouds till it come nigh. He will not be comforted, nor and will not depart till the Most High behold to judge righteously and execute judgment, right? So, we want the Lord to execute judgment and protect us, from these wicked people, man, because we're in a position where we're vulnerable. We're sheep in the midst of wolves, right? So, anyways, I'll leave it there, but, I sincerely pray and hope that this lesson was edifying. I just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakudash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us this truth. Until next time, I say Shalom.